with the session. Okay. So probably, today will be the last session with respect to exception handling here. Okay. So we have seen, all the different scenarios with respect to exception, error, and how do we handle them, and what is throws keyword as well. Okay. In today's session here, we are just going to talk about a very important topic here. Okay, so this will play a major role in your project perspective. Okay, and the topic which we are going to discuss in today's session is something called as custom exception. Okay, so first of all, what is custom exception over here? Okay, I'll give you a couple of scenarios here, okay, wherein you'll try to understand here. Okay, now imagine you are working on a Gmail application. Okay, I repeat, you are working on a Gmail application. So now if you want to log in into Gmail, there are two requirements here, right? So yeah, this is Gmail and your requirement is to log in into Gmail. If you want to log in into Gmail, you require two parameters, right? So you require ID and you require password, correct? So now you require the login credentials, right? So now if you want to log in into Gmail over here, first you will enter the ID, okay? Imagine as soon as you enter invalid user ID, if you want to log in into Gmail here, and as soon as you enter invalid email ID and try to log in over here, you'll get a pop-up message telling invalid user ID, correct? So internally, what happens? See, everyone would have experienced this, right? When you're trying to log in into Gmail or Instagram or Facebook or any application over here, as soon as you enter the email ID, invalid email ID, you'll get a pop-up message called as invalid email ID entered. So internally, what is happening over here? Internally, an exception had occurred and that exception was handled and they gave that suitable solution here. It's just not a SOP statement, print statement that the message was displayed. No. Once you try to enter invalid email ID, internally a lot of validation will happen to check if that email ID is valid or not. So if it is invalid here and custom exception will be invoked, an exception will occur, the exception is handled and they give that suitable solution over here. Got it? Similarly, with respect to password, you enter invalid password. As soon as you enter invalid password over here, an exception will occur. Okay, an exception will occur. We handle the exception and we give that suitable solution over here. So everywhere, okay, whenever it's about a negative scenario here, exceptions will play a major role. Okay, that all comes internally. Okay, similarly, imagine an ATM project. Okay, you're working on an banking application that is ATM, and you are trying to perform some transaction. You're trying to, perform some transaction here. Okay, so as soon as you want to withdraw 5,000 here. Okay, what is your requirement here? You want to withdraw 5,000, and your account balance is only 2,000 here. Okay, your account balance is 2,000, and you are trying to withdraw 5,000 here. You'll get a pop-up message telling insufficient balance, cannot withdraw so and so amount. But internally, what had happened? An exception had occurred. They handled the exception and they gave that suitable pop-up message here. It's just not a pop-up message immediately done here. No, internally there is a lot of validation happening here. Only when that validation is going in negative scenario, false scenario, an exception will occur. They handle it and they give that suitable solution here. So in simple terms here, okay, based on certain projects here, okay, we have to create our own exceptions here. If I'm working on a banking application, some exceptions related to banking I need to create. If I'm working on an e-commerce application, so some exceptions I have to create on my own. If I'm working on a Gmail application, again, a few exceptions I have to create on my own. So the exceptions which we are creating is called as user defined exception or custom exceptions here. Okay, at times based on certain projects, the programmer, the developer has to create, okay, few exceptions based on the project. Okay, certain exceptions he has to create on his own. So those exceptions are called as custom exception here. Okay, so first of all, imagine, okay, we'll try to work around, okay, the notes over here. Okay, So what is custom exception here? As I told you, an exception which we create is called as custom exception. Clear? So now how do we create a custom exception? We have certain rules for it. Okay, so we need to follow certain rules for it here. Okay, so just a moment here. Okay, so just a moment. I'm just going to freeze my screen. Okay, just a great. Okay, so we just got the basic idea about it, right? Okay, so I have a couple of notes over here so that you can look at the notes here and you'll be able to get it. Okay, so what is custom exception or user defined exception here? Based on certain projects here, okay, it is sometimes necessary to create our own exceptions. Okay, and those kind of exceptions which are created by the programmer or the developer is called as custom exception or user defined exception. But if you have to create an exception, we have to follow certain rules for it. Okay, what are the certain rules here? As I told you here, okay, these are the mandatory rules you have to follow. First, whatever is your exception name, you have to create it as a class. Why? Because all the exceptions are classes, right? So if you are creating your own exception, you have to create it as a class here. Okay, so we'll go back to my Eclipse workspace. Okay, over there we have a project called as exception handling. Under that, let me create a package, and the package name is custom exception. I write the package name as custom exception. So over here, if we created a project called as exception handling. Okay, and now we have created a package project called as exception handling and package called as custom exception. Okay, now under that, let me create a class here. Let me create a class. So I'll click on others and create a class. Okay, okay, perfect. So now here we will try to understand one example here. Okay, so we will take out some example called as invalid password exception. Okay, so I will create an exception by the name called as invalid password exception. Okay, so first of all, whatever is your exception, you have to create it as a class. So you are trying to work around a Gmail application wherein you have to perform login, correct? User ID, password. So since assume you are working on an login application, okay, wherein it has a login form and you have to log in. At times here, we might come across an exception called as invalid password exception. This exception is your name and you have created as a class. And we also know that all the exceptions are subclass of either exception class or runtime exception class. So even the exception which you create has to inherit the exception class or runtime exception class. Why? Yesterday we saw the different types of exceptions, right? All the checked exceptions will inherit the exception class and all the unchecked exceptions will inherit the runtime exception class, right? Similarly, whatever class you created, invalid password exception is my exception name. I created it as a class and that class should inherit, okay, that class should inherit the runtime exception class in order to make it as an unchecked exception. If I make it, class is invalid password exception. That is inheriting runtime exception class because this I want to make it as an unchecked exception. If I want to make it as a checked exception, I have to inherit the exception class. Clear? As of now, I'll make it as runtime exception class. This is all about it. I create a class called as invalid password exception and I'll make sure it is the subclass of runtime exception class. Clear? Now here you have one class and the class name is login form here. Okay, that class name is login form and you have your main method main wherein my execution always starts from. Okay, so here I'll just write it as string id equals to, I'll just write it the id as admin. Okay, and then the password equals to, okay, password equals to 123 here. So I am trying to work around with the data. If id dot equals, okay, admin, and we all know that if there is string, okay, if there is string here, we have to always make use of equals method here. In order to compare strings here, I told you don't make use of double equals. Okay, you have to always make use of equals method, because equals method is overridden to compare the content. Correct? So we have to always follow the equals method for comparing the string here. And okay, and I have to, after once the user ID is valid here, I will check the password here. If password, okay, is password equal to 123. If the password is equal to 123 here, so what does it mean here? It simply means that sysout login successful. I just write it as login successful. Clear? This is all about it. Okay, so I have an if condition wherein if the user ID is valid, I check the password over here. Okay, and if the password is valid, login successful. Else over here, okay, what am I supposed to do? Else it's a negative scenario. Negative scenario in the sense here, we have to create an object of that exception class, okay, and okay, we have to create an object of the exception class and invoke that exception here, meaning we have to throw an object. Clear? As I have told you long back here, when I tell 10 divided by 0, internally what will happen? An object of arithmetic exception is created and that object is thrown. Please clear? Similarly, which is the object, which is the class we have created here? Invalid password exception obj equals to new invalid password exception. I created an object of that specific exception and I have to make use of a keyword called as throw, and I have to throw that respective object. So I created an object of the exception which I want to invoke, and I will tell throw obj. So throw is a keyword which is used to invoke an object of exception. What is throw here? Throw is a keyword, and the job of this throw keyword is to invoke an object of exception here. So this is what we are supposed to understand here. Okay, so this is just a very simple part which we need to understand. See, what is throw? Throw is a keyword in order to invoke an object of exception here. Okay, and generally throw is used with only with custom exceptions. We create an exception and we have to invoke it explicitly. So how can we do it? Throw object of exception type. So you can tell throw new exception name, meaning the object of exception, or you can create an object of exception and throw that respective object. This is one way of doing it. Otherwise, you can tell throw, you can directly throw that respective object here. So anything is fine. Okay, both anything, either one thing, you can follow it over here. Okay, so now what is happening over here? See, when I just execute the program here, when I just execute the program, the output will be login successful. Why? Because you have entered the valid password and valid user ID. So if you want to accept dynamically here, what can I do here? I can just write it as scanner scan equals to new scanner, or you can create an object of scanner, okay, and pass system.in and pass system.in, and we have to import the scanner class from the data here. So here at the last here, once I'm done everything over here, you can close the scanner object, scan dot close over here. So I'm done with the job, right? So we can make use of scanner class and close it. So if I want to accept the user ID, so I will tell enter user ID. That ID I will store it into a variable called as scan.next here. Similarly, I will accept the password. Enter password. Okay, and I will store that password into a variable called as scan.nextend. And I check the comparison over here. This is all about the entire process. So now when I execute it over here, just look at the output here. What is happening? Enter user ID. I'll write it as admin. Enter password 123. See, login successful. Meaning I have entered valid ID. See, admin equals to admin. Yes. Is password equal to password? Yes. Therefore, login successful. But now when I execute my program, I tell the user ID, that is admin, and the password is I'll get as 125. So as soon as I tell, can you see what is happening? The exception is occurring where? Exception is occurring in the main method and the exception name is invalid password exception, and that is occurring in line number 23. So in line number 23 here, there is an exception over here, meaning as soon as you enter invalid password, an exception will occur. So once an exception will occur, what are we supposed to do here? So look at the notes over here. So first we have to create an exception. We have to create an exception object here, and we have to invoke that with the help of throw keyword. And then we have to handle it using try and catch block and give that suitable solution. So these two lines are responsible for giving an exception. So those lines I have to write it within the try block, and the solution will be written within the catch block here. So how will we write, what will be the exception that will be caught by the catch block? Invalid password exception E here. So I can just write it as invalid password entered. Okay, invalid password entered. So that way, we can do it. So now when I execute the program over here, okay, when I enter user ID, it's admin. So enter password, it's 123. So login successful. Now again here, once I enter the ID as admin and I enter invalid password 125. So can you see here? Invalid password entered. So I'm just trying to print it over here. But in real time, what will happen, okay, as soon as this is UI, front end, back end, database, everything you'll have. But as of now, I'm just working around with the console and Java. That's it. But once you have a proper front end, proper back end, and a proper database over here, this is where in real time you will implement. So as soon as you enter invalid password, the control goes to the else block. An object of invalid password exception is created, and that you will invoke with the help of throw keyword. And that exception is caught by the catch block, and that suitable solution is displayed to the user. It's just not a print statement, guys. It's not that we will be coding only in Java, only in Python, only in JavaScript. We will make use of different languages, right? So therefore, that exception has to be fetched from the database, and that has to be shown to the user. So that way, we are supposed to make use of, okay, the process here. Okay. So basically speaking, okay, what is custom exception? It's very simple. Based on certain projects, based on certain project like Gmail, email application, e-commerce application, banking application. So based on some kind of applications here, we have to create our own exceptions here. Okay. As a developer, okay, I have to create our own exceptions. So those exceptions which are created by the programmer are called as, by the user, are called as user defined exceptions or custom exceptions. Like arithmetic exceptions will be available to everyone. Array index out of bound exception will be available to everyone. Okay. Null pointer available to everyone. But certain exceptions, okay, it has to be specific to those kind of applications, like insufficient balance exception. Insufficient balance exception is only valid for banking application that you have to create. If you're working around with e-commerce application, such as Flipkart, Amazon here, you'll come across an exception called as invalid cart size. Okay, your cart size will be only 50. You can add only 50 products into your cart, not above 50 here. So you might experience invalid cart size, whenever you're working around with e-commerce application. So at times, we have to create our own exceptions. So those exceptions are custom exception. How do you create an exception? You have to create whatever is your exception name, right? You have to create it as a class. And that class should be a subclass of either exception class or runtime exception class. If you want to make the exception which you have created as checked exception, make sure it will inherit the exception class. If you want to make it an unchecked exception, inherit the runtime exception class. And we have to invoke that object with the help of throw keyword and handle and give the suitable solution here. Clear? That way we are supposed to handle it. Clear? Now imagine I am working on a banking application. Okay, I'm working on a banking application. So I'll tell Control N, I create a class. And in sometimes, if I'm working around with a banking application, I will come across a exception called as invalid balance exception. So insufficient balance exception is my exception name. I create it as a class. Okay. Now I have to create this exception as a checked exception. Okay. So what am I supposed to do it here? So if I have to treat it as a checked exception, I have to inherit the exception class. Extends exception. So I have to tell extends exception. Now insufficient balance exception will behave as a checked exception. Why? Because it is inheriting the exception class. If the insufficient balance exception, whichever class which I have created, if it is inheriting the runtime exception class, it will behave as unchecked. Okay, so this is what we are supposed to do it over here. Okay, now here after creating this respective exception over here, I will have one bank here. Okay, you will have ATM. Okay, you will have ATM, and you will have my main method wherein the execution will always start from. Okay, and here I will accept scanner. Okay, scanner s equals to new scanner of. Okay, and system dot in, because you are trying to accept dynamic input here. So I create an object of scanner input. At the last I will tell s dot close, because I'm done with my job here. So now your account balance is, okay, your account balance is 10k, okay, 10,000 rupees. Okay, so now you will tell sys out enter amount. See here, I'll just tell enter amount to be withdrawn. Enter amount to be withdrawn. So that I will store it into a variable called as amount here. Scan dot, okay, s dot next int. Okay, if bal amount, okay, is lesser than balance. Okay, if amount is lesser than or equal to balance here, okay, you can withdraw successfully. Correct? No, if the amount which you want to withdraw is lesser than or equal to the balance available, you can withdraw. Okay, withdrawal successful. Okay, else over here, what am I supposed to do? Else, it's a negative scenario. So we have to invoke an object of exception here. Insufficient balance exception. So throw insufficient balance exception. So as soon as I tell throw insufficient balance exception, we are getting an error here. See, just over unhandled exception type insufficient balance exception. It means it's a checked exception, and checked exception should always be handled immediately. See here, I get this respective data, try block and suitable catch block. Okay, and you can also have, this is my else block, and you can write it as insufficient balance. You can just write it as not enough balance here. Okay, not enough balance to withdraw. Okay, this is all about the entire process here. Okay, so that way we are just supposed to understand and try to work around with the content here. So now when I execute the program here, see here, enter amount to be withdrawn 5,000. See, withdrawal successful because your account balance was 10,000. No, so you can withdraw successfully. Now your account balance is 10,000, but you're trying to withdraw 15,000. See, not enough balance to withdraw. Okay, that's it. So what happened here? As soon as your amount is not lesser than or equal to balance, the control goes to the else block. Throw new insufficient balance exception, meaning we are throwing or invoking an object of insufficient balance exception, and that was handled with the help of try and catch block, and we are giving this suitable solution here. So this is all about the entire data here. Clear? And you can also tell this s dot close. Okay, if you want you can write it or you can just ignore it. This is all about the entire process here. Clear? Aste guys, okay, this is a simple part which we are supposed to understand here. Okay, and now, okay, if I make it as a checked exception, okay, if I make it as an unchecked exception, what am I supposed to do? I have to inherit the runtime exception class. If it is runtime exception class, it's a checked unchecked exception. See, it does not force me to handle it immediately. Is it forcing me to handle it immediately? Not at all. See, when I execute it over here, okay, enter amount to be withdrawn. See, 15,000. Exception in thread main, meaning exception has occurred in main method, and that is present in a package called as custom exception. Okay, insufficient balance exception is the exception name, and that is present in a package called as custom exception. and that is present in line number 21. 21 is the line number which is giving an exception. Okay, and then you can handle it. Okay, how do we handle it? With the help of try and catch block. So with the help of try and catch block, we are handling that respective exception. So now as soon as I tell some random data over here, I get it as not enough balance to withdraw. So that way we can try to do this entire process in a beautiful manner here. Clear? This is all about the entire process here. So in real time, as I told you here, but here I'm just making use of invoking an exception, handling it using try and catch block, and giving the suitable solution. But in real time, we would have a proper web technology web page. Okay, at the back end we will have Java, wherein I would have created those exceptions here, and at the right instance, at the right moment, I will invoke it and I will handle that suitable solution here. Okay, so this is the importance of custom exception here. Clear? This is all about it, guys. Okay, so anyone having any confusions as of now here? Okay, how do we create a custom exception and how do we invoke it? Okay, with the help of throw keyword, right? So anyone having any confusions, guys, with respect to today, I mean whatever we did now? Any questions? Okay, great. Okay, so we just got the basic idea about what is exceptions and how we are supposed to do it. And there is one question here. Okay, how do we, it can it inherit implicitly? Okay, your answer is no. Exception, whatever exceptions you created here, you have to either inherit the exception class or runtime exception class explicitly. It's not that we can do it implicitly here. That's not possible at all. Okay, so this is what we are supposed to do it. Now, I'll give you one instance, guys. Okay, I'll give you one instance here. I just wanted you to tell me what will be the output over here. Okay, we have already done this. Okay, we have already done this multiple times. We have a class called as employee. Open curly braces, close curly braces. And every employee will have, okay, every employee will have a variable called as name. Okay, it has a variable called as name, and I am initializing with that, with the help of a constructor. So how will I do it here? So I will just write it as string name, and within the constructor I have to write this dot name equals to name here. Clear? Done. So now I have another class. Okay, I have another class. Okay, it's not the same class here, it's a different class. I will have class test, open curly braces, close, and I will also have my main method. Blah 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 blah. I'll have my main method. So I will create an object. Okay, how will I create an object? Employee equals to new employee of. Okay, and I have to pass the name of the employee, that is Tom. So when I tell new, what will happen here? A new object will get created. Okay, a new object will get created with the address 111, and E will be pointing to that respective object here. Correct? And then the non-static variable name would have got initialized to null here initially. And then slowly Tom goes over here. That Tom is passed over here, and that name Tom will get stored into the current object's name. Current object is E. In that E, Tom will get stored here. And now when I tell SOP E dot name, what is the output I get? I get the output as Tom. Correct. This is what I did over here, and everyone knows this program now. Okay. So here, if I go back to my program, see, I create a class O1. I created an object of employee only, no? Yeah, perfect. So we have a class called as employee, and it has a variable called as string name. Okay, and I will initialize it with the help of a constructor over here. Okay, I will initialize with the help of a constructor. This dot name equals to name here. So we have a class called as employee, and we are creating a constructor. We have a class called as employee. We have a variable age, and we are trying to initialize it with the help of a constructor. Now I have one more class called as test class, wherein I'll also have my main method. Okay, so over here I will create an object of employee. Employee equals to new employee of, and I pass the employee name as Tom. So now when I tell sys out e dot name, I can get the output successfully as Tom here. Correct? Sir, no problems, nothing, sir. It was absolutely a easy program here, dumb program here, which we have already done it several times here. But what was the necessity I did it now? With something is there, no? That's the reason I have done this topic, no? Okay. Now imagine, as soon as I make this variable as private, what did you understand? What did you understand? Sir, everything is okay, sir. But since you made this variable as private, this name can be accessed only within the same class. You can do anything within the same class, not outside the class. So you will create an object of employee, you will pass Tom, that Tom will get stored into variable name here. Okay. But you cannot print it directly. You cannot print it directly. Why? Because it is private. So what is the alternative for it here? Okay, what is the alternative for it here? See, in my respective program here, I have e.name. When I tell e.name here, I will get the output as Tom here. See, I get the output as Tom because the access specifier is default as of now. Okay, but as soon as I make it as private over here, so this variable name can be accessed only within the same class, but I cannot access it outside the class. Why? Because name is a private variable. So what do we have any other choice in order to access the variable here? Do we have any idea? Okay, how can we do it here? Any idea? Okay, so there was an answer called a singleton pattern. Guys, don't get confused here. Singleton design pattern is to create only a single object. Okay, here there is nowhere I'm talking about a single object here. I'm just talking how do you access that private variable outside the class. Heard of something called as Java Bean class long back here? If the variable is private, we cannot access it directly. But we're making use of setter method to set the data and getter method to get the data, right? So with the help of a constructor, I am setting the value. See, I am passing Tom. That Tom will get stored within the variable. I am setting it with the help of a constructor, but I cannot get it. How can I get it here? Getter method. How will we develop getter method, guys? Simple. In order to generate getter method, it's a very, very simple task. How? Get what? Get name is the method name because name is the private variable that cannot be accessed outside. Get name is the method name. Open parenthesis close. Open curly braces close here. Right? And get name means it has to return that respective name here. Get name means he has to return the name to the caller. So name is the return statement. Okay, so what will be my return type? String, and that will be public, right? So what am I supposed to do in the program here? I will have a getter method. Get name is the method name, okay, and I have to return the name over here. So what will be my return type? String, because the method is returning a string data, and it should be a public method so that everyone can access it. So rather than telling it as e.name, I will tell e.get name over here. So when I tell get name, I will get the output here. See, just a moment. I made some mistake. Okay, perfect. So now when I execute it, I am getting the name, but in a different way. Clear? The reason what I did over here is, okay, see here, I will create a class called as age invalid exception. Okay, I'll create a class called as age invalid exception. Imagine you are working on an RTO application. Okay, if you want to apply for driving license here, your legal age is supposed to be 18. You try to fill an online form here. Okay, if you want to apply for learning license, guys, learner's license here, okay, LL here, you have to fill an online application over here. And if your age is lesser than lesser than 18, you're not supposed to apply for DL, right? You cannot, your valid age for applying for DL is 18, correct? So I have created a class with the help of an exception name. So I'm working on an RTO application, okay, wherein I come across an exception called as age invalid exception. But I want to treat it as an unchecked exception. So I have to inherit the runtime exception class. So age invalid exception is my exception name. I created it as a class, and that class is inheriting the runtime exception class because it will behave as an unchecked exception. Okay, and then it will have, okay, a private variable called as, okay, private variable called as message over here. See, the same program, okay, I will have a variable called as private, okay, and here I will initialize it with the help of a constructor. Okay, I will just create it with the help of a constructor. So within the constructor, it will accept a variable called as message, and I will initialize it with the help of the constructor. This dot message equals to message here. So don't you think so that employee, and this is very easy here, and I will have a method called as get message method, okay, and he will return the message over here. And what will be the return type? The return type will be string, and the method access specifier will be public over here. Got it? This is all about it. Okay. But now here, if I don't write it as public here, it gives me an error. Can you tell me the reason why? Can you tell me the reason why it does, I mean, why it does not give? It's not predefined, okay? See, even in employee class and age invalid class, it's almost same. If I don't use public here, it will work in I mean, it works over here in employee class. But here it's giving an error here, okay? I should mandate, see, cannot reduce the visibility of inherited method from table, blah, 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 blah. Can you tell me what did you understand with this statement here? I'll give you the complete hint only I've given here, okay? Cannot reduce the visibility of the inherited method from throwable here. What does this statement mean? Any idea, guys? Any idea? Think, no? Think. What did you understand with the statement here? Do you all think so? We have, okay, do you all think so here? This class, okay, age invalid exception is inheriting the runtime exception class. A runtime exception class is inheriting the exception class, and that is inheriting the throwable class. So from the throwable class, we had two important methods. That is get message method as well as, okay, get message method as well as print stack trace method. So once we write a get message method, we are trying to override the method here. So the access specifier should always be same, or it should be of increased visibility. Sir, how is this overriding, sir? Guys, get message method is a predefined method in the throwable class. From throwable, it is inherited to exception. From exception, it is inherited to runtime exception. From runtime exception, it is inherited to age invalid exception. So that way, we are trying to have a private variable, initializing it with the help of a constructor and accessing with the help of getter method. Simple. Employee class, we had a private variable, we are initializing it with the help of a constructor, and we are accessing with the help of an getter method. So that way, if you want to create a custom exception, you can just have a class that will inherit the exception or runtime exception class. See, both the classes have done it easy way. Optionally, you can override the get message method also. You can override what? The get message method. How? By writing this entire logic here. You will have a variable. You will initialize that variable with the help of a constructor, and you can call that particular method here. Okay. And then, okay, I'll have a class. Okay. Imagine I'm working on a matrimony portal. Okay, matrimony portal here, matrimony portal. Okay, so over here, wait, I'll explain the entire program here. Okay, I will create an object of scanner wherein I want to accept the dynamic input. Okay, I'll just want to accept the dynamic input here, so I'll just write it as system.in over here. Okay, so now here I'll just tell sysout enter age. Enter age. That age I will store it into a variable called as, okay, s dot next int over here, and I tell if age is greater than or equal to 21. Okay, for the legal age for a guy to get married is 21, right? Okay, so yeah, that's the reason. Okay, he'll tell here get married soon. Okay, get married soon here. Okay, else what am I supposed to do here? Simple. We have to create an object of age invalid exception. Okay. We have to create an object obj equals to new object, and we have to give some message that has to be displayed. I will just give it as have patience. Okay. I just have it as I just write it as have patience here. Okay. So what is happening here? I am creating an object of age invalid exception, and I'm passing some suitable message over here that goes to the constructor over here, and that will get stored into the current objects variable. That will get stored into the current objects variable. Okay. And after I create the exception, I have to invoke that object of exception. How? With the help of throw obj. And that can also be reduced in a single line, no? How can we do it in a single line also? If you want to do it in a single line, you have to just make use of this particular statement here. Throw this data. This is all about it. Okay. So now when I execute the program here, see what happens over here. Okay. So age is telling. Okay. So enter age. I'll read as 22. See, get married soon. And if I just write it as, 12, see, read out the exception here. It is telling exception has occurred in the main method. And what is the exception name? Age invalid exception. And what is the message we have passed? Have patience. Okay, so whatever I pass it over here as the constructor call, that will be the message over here that will get displayed internally. Okay, so now when I execute it over here, so I get it as 12. See, have patience, and line number 18 is giving an exception. My program got terminated. So we are supposed to handle it over here. How do we handle the exception over here? Simple. This particular line, we have to surround it with the help of try and catch block. Okay, try, open curly braces, write it down, and you will have catch block. And if you don't know the exception name, you can write the superclass exception always. Doesn't matter. Okay, you can just write the superclass exception and you can tell it as sysout have. I'll just write e dot get message. Okay, I'll just write it as e dot get message method because we have overridden the get message method. So I can just execute that program. Have patience. You are not yet 21. You are not yet 21. So now when I execute it over here, so I'll just write it as 12. See, have patience, you are not yet 21. So now when I execute it as 22, yes, get married soon here. So that way, we're trying to do it in a beautiful data here. Okay. So this is all about how do we work on a custom exception. So basically, we have four fundas, guys. Okay. What is the first thing here? You have to create an whatever is your exception name. No, create it as a class. Okay, so you have to create a class with the exception name. Okay, second, you have to understand since all the exceptions are subclasses of either runtime or exception, you have to decide you have to make this as checked or you have to make this as unchecked. Okay, so now you'll make it as unchecked. In this particular scenario, you'll make it as unchecked. You created a class with the help of an exception name, and that's an unchecked exception. And now you wanted to display some suitable value, solution. See, there is a variable called as message. You are trying to initialize it with the help of a constructor and getter method. See, all the concepts you are already done with it. We're just trying to recall it once. Okay. And in the main class, if it is greater than or equal to 21, okay, you can get married. If not, you will invoke an object of exception by passing the suitable message here. And that exception is caught by the reference E and I will get the expected solution. I'll get the E.get message meaning whatever message I have passed that will get displayed. If you don't handle it over here, okay, if you just don't handle it over here, see what will happen here if you don't handle it. If you don't handle it and if you give the age as 19. See, exception in thread main. So it's telling age invalid exception. Have patience, you're not 8. 21 is the message and line number 19. So what are we supposed to do? I have to just, write it as e.get message. When I tell e.get message, it means it just gives the small message about the exception. If I give it as 12, have patience, you're not at 21. Okay. So this is all about the most important topics here with respect to exceptions here. Okay. So this is all about the complete things which we have to discuss with respect to exception handling. Okay. So we are done with complete of exception handling and I have given so many examples for custom exception. Okay. I've given probably 3 examples. Okay. So it's time for you all to start practicing exception handling. Okay. Now, in an interview here, okay, I'll discuss a few interview questions on exception handling. Trust me, it's interviewer's favorite topic. Okay, exception handling is an interviewer's favorite topic here. Okay, he can royally screw you on this particular topic for more than 1 hour. Okay, he'll keep on firing questions at you that you'll all get bugged up. Okay, so first of all, okay, he will ask the difference between error and exception. He'll tell you difference between error and exception here. Okay, so now here, if we ask difference between error and exception here, how will you answer? Sir, error is a runtime interruption which cannot be handled. Exception is a runtime exception which can be handled. That one answer is more than sufficient. Error is a runtime exception, which runtime interruption, guys, not exception. Okay, sorry. Error is a runtime interruption which cannot be handled. We have to debug. But exception is a runtime interruption which we can handle it. Clear? So in other words, if they just ask you to explain what is an error over here, okay, you will just tell, okay, error is a mistake or an interruption which occurs during the execution of a program, during compile time due to syntax mistake, due to runtime when we execute a class without main method. I have told you this. This is just a quiet definition about error, but if they ask the difference, you're supposed to answer it in a different way. And you know what is exception as well, right? Exception is an interruption or a blockage here which stops the execution of a program. It is an event or a block or blockage or an interruption which stops the execution of a program, and the below lines of code will not get executed. So what are we supposed to do? Handle. Errors cannot be handled, exceptions can be handled, as simple as that. So how do you handle try and catch blocks here? Okay, try block is nothing but the critical lines which might give an exception, write it in the try block. And the solution, oh, if at all an exception occurs, what am I supposed to do? Write it in the catch block. Okay, and we have seen one try block having multiple catch blocks, superclass exception called as exception, no, uh, executable lines between try and catch block. Okay, all those. Okay, and then we also understood two important methods. Get message will get the small message about the exception. Print stack trace will be the complete information about the exception. Okay, and then we also saw finally block. What is finally block? So finally block is nothing but, okay, any executable set of statements if we write it in the finally block, meaning the set of statements or set of instructions if we write it in the finally block, that will get executed all the time. Okay, that will mandatorily get executed all the time. And very famous interview question, okay, explain, okay, this is probably one of the most important questions in your interview. Explain final, finalize, and finally. This is your question. Okay, oh my god, how will you answer it? Okay, explain final, finalize, finally. How will you answer? It's simple. Final is a keyword that we can use it with a variable, we can use it with a method, and we can use it with a class. What is final? Final is a keyword which we can use it with a variable, which we can use it with a method, and which we can use it with a class. If there is a final variable, it acts as a constant, meaning we cannot reinitialize. If there is a final method, it cannot be overridden, but it can be inherited, but we cannot override final methods. And final class cannot be inherited. So that way you have to explain beautifully what is final. Just don't tell, sir, final cannot be reinitialized. I'm gonna kill you seriously. Okay? Final is a keyword which we can use it with a variable, method, and a class. Okay? Final variable is a constant whom we cannot reinitialize. Final methods can be inherited, but we cannot override. But final class we cannot, inherit at all. So we know what is final. Very good. Finally, sir, it's simple, sir. We use it during exception handling. Okay. The lines which we write within the finally block, the set of instructions which we write in the finally block gets executed all the time. Irrespective of exception will occur or not, the finally block will get executed all the time. Okay. Then what is finalize, sir? Finalize is a method, okay, used during garbage collection. Okay, finalize is a method used during garbage collection. before an object is garbage collected, meaning before an object is removed from the memory here, the finalize method will get executed. So what is finalize method? Finalize method is used during garbage collection. That is, when an object is getting removed, when an object is getting garbage collected, just before that, finalize methods will get executed. Okay, so this is what you are supposed to explain it beautifully in the interview perspective. Clear? And we know what is checked exception and checked exception. Checked exceptions are compiler known, handle immediately, and they all will inherit the exception class. And unchecked exceptions are compiler unknown, we need to handle it, but the compiler does not force us to handle immediately. They're all subclasses of runtime exception class. And we know what is checked, I mean a custom exception. The exceptions which we create, the programmer, the user creates, it's custom exception. And one more interesting point. What is the difference between throws and throw? Again, very, very important. Throws, see, if there is a method and exception is occurring in that method and that has not been handled. If I want to indicate to the caller that exception will occur and have not handled, I have to make use of throws keyword. Throws meaning it's giving an indication to the caller. Throws is a keyword which is used to indicate the caller about the possibility of an exception, meaning the exception might occur in the method and it has not been handled. That information, that indication has to be given to the caller. With the help of throws keyword, I'm going to achieve that. And throw is used to invoke an object here. Exception is not occurring. You are invoking that object or calling that particular object here. Okay, so this is the job of throw keyword. Don't get confused with throws and throw. Throw is used to invoke an object of exception. Throws is an indication to the caller about the exception. Okay, so this is all about exceptions handling. Okay.